Believe nothing you hear and half of what you see. That is a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. And that is a quote that I think Browns fans should take to heart when it comes to the draft this season, because that's kind of how you're going to have to operate. It's been a long time since the Browns have had a top 5 pick in the draft. It's been since 2018. Think about that. The last top 5 pick the Cleveland Browns had was Denzel Ward. And it's not like Denzel Ward's super young. He's on the verge of getting to his 3rd contract in the NFL. That was the last time the Browns had a top 5 pick. And because it's been a very long time since the Browns have had a top 5 pick, I think actually there has not been a single draft in the existence of this channel, which has been around for 6+ years, where the Browns have had a top 5 pick in the draft. There are going to be a lot of things that we're not going to be used to that we have to get used to again. And one of these things is how out of control the Browns rumor mill will be because of the fact that the Browns have a top 5 pick. You are going to hear everything. You're going to hear that the Browns, no doubt, not drafting a quarterback. You're going to hear that the Browns, no doubt, drafting a quarterback. It's set in stone, right? You're going to hear all kind of crazy rumors. Some of it real, some of it smoke, some of it both. I've already seen this process at work, right? I saw Diana Rossini on the Le Batard show, and she said something to the effect of she thinks the Browns are going to take a quarterback because of everything that's going on with Deshaun Watson. That got picked up and got turned into Diana Rossini confirms Browns looking for quarterback in 2024 draft. Now, will the Browns draft the quarterback? Will they avoid the quarterback position in the first round of this year's draft? I don't know the answer to that, right? I have my personal preference on what I think the Browns should do based on my view and my feelings about the Browns draft class. But that isn't necessarily guaranteed to be the same thing that the Browns want to do. They might want to get a quarterback. It might be true that they're going to go quarterback in this draft class. It might be true that they're going to avoid the quarterback position in this draft class. You're going to hear all kind of things that promise to tell you that they know the answer of what the Browns are going to do and what they're not going to do. But the Browns are going to be sending out all kind of smoke screens because the Browns might be interested in trading that number 2 pick. And if you want to trade that number 2 pick, you might want to seem like, hey, I might want to get one of these quarterbacks, right? It goes down to this, right? Remember how I talked about the catch-22 of J.J. McCarthy and trading for J.J. McCarthy? In the catch-22 of trading for J.J. McCarthy is, if the price is too high for J.J. to trade for him, you're going to scare a lot of teams off because that's a ridiculous price to pay. But if you do the reverse and you offer a price that is a little bit too good to believe is true, you're also going to scare some teams off because they're going to assume because the price is that low that there's not much there for you to get out of that guy if you're willing to sell that low on him. Like, you must know something about that injury, or you must know something about that player that you don't like and that you don't want to tie yourself to long term. Like when San Francisco shipped off Trey Lance for a 5th-round pick, it made you think, something's got to be wrong if they're willing to send off somebody that they traded multiple 1st-round picks for a 5th. Same thing can be true for the 2nd overall pick. Now, it's not the exact same because we're talking about the potential of every pick that you can make versus a individual player that you would be trying to sell. But there's a principle there that applies. If you're trying to benefit from somebody believing that there is a franchise quarterback in this draft, and you're also a team that needs a quarterback, but you're interested in trading back on this pick, you on some level, if you're the Cleveland Browns, need to validate whatever team that wants to trade up with you's feelings about that quarterback, or else they might get cold feet about a big time trade, right? Like, you have to kind of put it out there that you like the quarterbacks in this draft class. You have to kind of put it out there that you might even take a quarterback in this draft class. If a team calls you, they're calling from the perspective of, hey, we want to move you off of quarterback so we can get our quarterback, and that means that they're willing to offer you more. Now, will you be able to get a war chest for the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft? I'm not sure about that. My personal feeling is that these 2 quarterbacks at the top of this draft just are not good enough to demand a king's ransom for. If this were Drake May and Jaden Daniels, you'd be able to get whatever you wanted for that 2nd overall pick. And the Browns still wouldn't do it because they would just draft Drake May or Jaden Daniels at 2. But this isn't that, in my opinion. I think these prospects are far off from being Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and on some level, even like Michael Penix, right? Like, I think that they're not really there on par with last year's prospects. If you're asking me where these guys would rank in last year's draft, I don't want to play that game, but it's not the same as what was at the top 3 of that draft class, right? When we're talking about Daniels, Caleb Williams, and Drake May. I also don't think a ton of teams are going to be looking for quarterback this offseason. I feel like it's been greatly assumed that a lot of these teams who don't have obvious answers at quarterback are going to be desperate for quarterback. I don't know if that's the case, right? Last year was the year to be desperate for quarterback, and 6 teams took a quarterback, and I think even more teams made like moves in free agency to get a starting quarterback. I think the teams that were desperate to make a move at the position made their moves last year. I don't know how desperate these teams are. Think about it like this. The Browns should probably be the most quarterback desperate team in this draft. Like, if there's a team that's willing to reach on a quarterback out of just pure situational reasoning, it would probably be the Browns. And I don't know if they're likely to take a quarterback in this draft class. Same could go for Tennessee. And I know people are like, hey, Tennessee can't just stick with Will Levis, and that might be true, but that doesn't mean that sticking with Will Levis or drafting a quarterback is the only solution available to the Tennessee Titans. The same way that sticking with Deshaun Watson, which the Browns aren't going to do, or drafting a quarterback aren't the only 2 options available for the Browns to find a starter in 2025. It might be that teams look at this draft class and decide to themselves, this is not the year to go buck wild at quarterback, and decide not to do it. It happens from time to time. It's not the norm, but it does happen from time to time, especially when the prospects aren't super intriguing. It happened recently in 2022. I'm not saying this class is as bad as the 2022 class. I would think that Shador and Cam Ward would be better prospects than Kenny Pickett was in the pandemic. Like, it's not so dissimilar that I couldn't imagine that same thing happening. Another reason that makes me concerned about the market that the Browns will be able to get in the trade bag potentially is it feels like we're operating a lot off of assumptions versus how you feel about a player, right? Usually it's, oh man, to get a chance at X quarterback prospect, a team would be willing to give up this, that, and the third to make sure they can get their guy, and this guy could be the guy. That's usually the conversation we have about teams being able to trade back or trading up in the draft. Right now, we're just relying on, well, it's the number 2 pick. Somebody's going to want a quarterback. So statistically speaking, it's likely to happen. I don't know if the pressure's there, though, right? Is this a class where you're going to be able to get a ton out the 2nd overall pick from moving back just because somebody wants so badly to get their quarterback? I know a lot of people are looking at the Raiders to be the team that breaks rank and gets desperate for quarterback, and for a good reason, right? The Raiders have a history of just doing very knee-jerk reactionary, short-term thought process things, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. But this might be one of the years where they hold off. And when the year in 2022, everybody thought Kenny Pickett was going to go in the top 5, same as Malik Willis. Both those guys fell out the top 5. Kenny Pickett went all the way to 20. I remember the same argument happening with Johnny Manziel and Teddy Bridgewater, where people just knew that those guys were going to go early in that draft class, and both those guys went late first. I don't think this situation is that dissimilar from like the Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater situation that happened in the 2014 draft. I think it's possible that we look up and we're at pick 15 and none of these quarterbacks were taken off the board, and that's the big talk of the draft day one. Again, it's possible that teams do what they always do and get excited about any quarterback that has a pulse and draft these quarterbacks super early. Of course, that's a possibility. It's usually what happens in the NFL. But I don't want to rule out the possibility that the teams don't think that these quarterbacks are worth it and decide that they're not going to make that move for quarterback this year. One of the things to think about when you're talking about positional value in the draft is you have to remember that you're talking about prospects. These guys aren't guaranteed to be good players at the position, right? Positional value to me matters a lot more in free agency, where we're talking about known commodities who have NFL resumes, and that makes sense to say, hey, I'm gonna give this position this amount of money. But when we talk about positional value in the draft, I think it all kind of falls apart because you're assuming with positional value that everybody that you select is going to be good at that position. It's like this. The Browns drafted Justin Gilbert in 2014, 8th overall, because positional value dictated that a corner makes more sense than drafting a 3-tech. Well, the best 3-tech in that draft went later in Aaron Donald. Now, yes, did Justin Gilbert make more sense from a positional value standpoint? Of course. Would you have rather had Aaron Donald? Yes. Why? It's simple. Aaron Donald was actually good. Justin Gilbert wasn't good. That's the problem with positional value in the draft. We don't know which of these players for sure are going to be good NFL players. So if you don't know who's going to be good, what position they play is secondary to how you feel about them as prospects. So for me, if you're looking at a prospect, it's how good is this prospect? How sure are you about this prospect? Then if you have a tie between two prospects where you're like, hey, I like these players equally, then positional value starts to matter. But if we're just going into it saying positional value, you got to draft the position of value here. You got to take quarterback because it's a position of value. Well, if you draft a quarterback who's not good, they have no positional value to you. Like, what is the positional value of somebody on the bench? No matter what their position is. It's not very high, I would guess. So that's what I think about positional value. We overrate it. We use it for things that it was never meant to use. So understanding that, I think it's important to understand that there's always going to be a fog over what we think the Browns are going to do. We're never going to really have a great idea until later on in this process of what it is that the Browns could do. And even then, we could feel great about what the Browns are going to do as far as the accuracy of what they're going to do in the draft. And then they go up to the podium and do something else. This is going to be peak silly season, Browns fans. And some of you guys haven't really participated in silly season for a very long time. You know, we out of shape when it comes to silly season. It's been since 2017 and 2018 that we've been in silly season. So get ready for silly season. Get in shape for silly season, because for Browns fans, it's been a long time since we've been in the full swing of silly season. There are going to be people who are going to crash out about all kind of quarterback prospects. There are going to be people who suggest wild things. There's going to be somebody who puts Jackson Dart in the first round of their mock draft and maybe even at number 2. We're going to see it all, right? We're going to see it all during this draft season. It's important to keep a level head. It's important to remember that rumors are just rumors and that there's going to be a lot of smoke. So don't overreact to any one rumor that you see. Don't let a rumor that you see about the draft ruin your day, because the odds are that that rumor's probably not real. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.